everyone, my name is Fran O'Boyle. I'm a storyteller and I've visited Larne Arts Centre many times, and I'd like to say thank you for to the Mid and East Antrim Borough Council for funding this project and for funding many of the visits to Larne Arts Centre that I've made in the past. If you keep seeing me looking over the camera, it's because I've got a friend sitting in, well, she is a live audience. She's making me feel a bit less foolish talking to an empty room. So the story I've got today is from County Antrim. I like the folklore of County Antrim because it's where many of my family come from, and this particular story comes from the island of Rathlin, on the northern end of the Glens of Antrim, just close to the town of Ballycastle. And Rathlin is a beautiful place. If you visit it today, it's an interesting experience. There's lots of different birds to see, and just a wonderful, beautiful place to go to. And many hundreds of years ago, it was no less beautiful, but it could be dangerous. Well, at the time of this story, there was a beautiful princess living on the island, and her dad was the king of the island, and they lived in a small community of farmers and fishermen, and they struggled to make ends meet, and they looked after each other. They were like a little country all of their own. And the girl's name, the princess's name, was Taisy, and she was very beautiful. Her beauty was known widely. But not only was she known for her beauty, she was known because she was a very clever woman. And whenever her dad had important decisions to make, he would call to her and ask her to help him make them. And he always valued her counsel, and he found that it was wise to pay heed to what she said. And he's very proud of his daughter, Taisy. Now, Taisy, living on an island, she was isolated, a bit like many of you lot have been lately. And but whenever she could, she would go to the mainland 3 miles away, and she would travel overland to visit her boyfriend. She had a boyfriend, and she loved him very much, and he happened to be the son of the chieftain of the Clan O'Hanlon. So he was very important, or at least he liked to think he was. And they were very much in love, and whenever they would meet, which wasn't very often, they would talk about all sorts of things, but one of them was where they were going to live after they'd got married. And she would say, "I think we should live near my people." And he would say, "Well, I think we should live near my people." And they couldn't come to a decision. And it was also because of the times they lived in. You see, just like now, there was a lot of uncertainty about. The Clan O'Hanlon was at war with its neighbours, the Clan O'Neill, over boundaries and things. Lots of things were undecided and nobody knew what was going to happen. Just like today with this virus. But it was always one of the topics that they talked about and discussed when they met. But anyway, on with the story. One terrible stormy day. There was a terrible storm at sea, and Rathlin, being an island, caught the brunt of it. There was great waves crashing over the rocks and over the quay where all their little boats were kept, rocking them up and down like bobbins on water. And just as evening was coming in, a ship, a Viking ship, a long ship, sailed into that harbour, into that bay. And the people of the island, they would normally be very worried if a Viking longship came into their bay. But they could see on this occasion that they had nothing to be afraid of because the Vikings needed help. They'd come into the bay to shelter from the storm. And the people of Rathlin, being pretty much the same nature as they are today, they went down to that beach and they got those sailors off that boat, helped them, get them warm clothes and good food inside them, and got them warm and dry. And each house on the island gave shelter to one of those Viking warriors. And the captain of the Viking ship stayed with the king himself in his little dun, his little castle, which wasn't much bigger than an ordinary modern house. And they would sit by the fire, and in the evenings they would chat and tell stories and ask riddles and sing songs and talk when they'd eaten. And the captain of the ship sat next to the Princess Tazy, and he was struck by her beauty, but that wasn't the only thing that struck him. He was quite impressed with how clever she was. She had some stimulating conversation and interesting things to say, and he was very impressed with her, and she left an impression. So that when the ship came to go a few days later, when it came to leave Rathlin, and everybody was packing their stuff with fresh provisions into the boat, she was on his mind. He carried away an impression of her. And he sailed away back to Norway, and when he got there, he had to pay his taxes like, well, everybody does, and he went to the king of Norway's castle to do that. When he got there, he saw that there was a problem. While he'd been away, the king of the Vikings had lost his wife. She'd died. And he was beside himself with grief. He was tortured. And he couldn't do his job properly. See, the king of the Vikings' wife, a bit like Tazy, she was very pretty, she was very beautiful, but she was also very clever. And she would sit with her husband and they would talk about things that needed to be decided upon, policies, new laws, new taxation rules and all kinds of stuff. And he valued her opinion a great deal. And now she wasn't here. He was missing that help. And not only that, but he was terribly sad because she died. So he was moping about and being sad all day and not really focusing on the things that he should have been focusing on. And his people, his courtiers, they noticed this and they thought, well, the country's going to fall apart unless we can do something. The chieftains from the tribes, they're already talking about rebelling and things are going to fall apart and they're all going to start warring and fighting with each other like the old days, before Norway was united. We've got to do something. We've got to find him a new wife, someone who can sort of at least try to fill the place of his old one. She's got to be good looking, she's got to be beautiful, but she's also got to be clever. She's got to be bright so she can help him. And the captain of the Viking ship, he heard all this and he thought, I know who would do that job. And he told them about this princess that he'd met on the island of Rathlin off the coast of Ireland. When the king got to know about her, and he said, well, okay, yeah, bring her over. She sounds perfect for the job. I need someone. And they said, well, we'd better take a dowry of some sort. So they put a big treasure chest together and they filled it full of gold and silver, necklaces and bracelets and beautiful silken dresses and all sorts of things. And they sailed away with that treasure chest on that Viking ship, the same one. And when it sailed into Rathlin Bay, the people of the bay, the people of Rathlin, they thought, oh, it's the Viking ship back again. What do they want? Well, they had nothing to fear because, well, the Viking captain, he soon told the people what he'd come for, and they took him to the castle and he sat in the king's little castle and they had something to eat and they sat down with their glasses of wine and the captain said, well, this is what I've come for. You know, this big box of treasure that I've brought with me, well, you've probably been wondering what it's for. Well, it's to buy your daughter, really. Our king needs a wife, she's died, and he needs a new one. We'd like your daughter to be that new wife. She's beautiful, she's clever, she's perfect. And you'll get all this gold and silver and all these lovely things, and there's presents for your daughter to pay for her. Well, said the king of Rathlin, I think we'd better see what she says. Now, she'd been listening behind a curtain, so she stepped forth and she said, well, I just heard all that. And she said, I'm very flattered, but I can't do it. You see, I've got a boyfriend already and I like him. He's really nice and I'm engaged. We're talking about getting married and all that. So even though I like some of those dresses and things and I like that gold necklace thing there, but I've got to say no, I can't marry your king. And the Viking captain said, no? What do you mean no? It wasn't an invitation. It was like a demand, really. You can't say no to the king of the Vikings. He's going to be very, very angry. And she said, I know he is, but I still can't marry him. I've got a fella already. Well, a couple of days later, the Viking captain went back down to his ship with all his warriors, and he was not best pleased. He said, "Do you realise I've got to go and tell him what you said now? And I'm not looking forward to doing that. He's going to be so angry." "Sorry, we can't do anything about it," said Tazy to the Viking captain. "It's not the end of it," he said. And she said, "I know." And they watched, her and her father watched that ship sail away, and when it had gone, they turned to each other and they said, "We'd better start getting ready because they're going to come back, you know." Well, when the Viking captain heard what had happened, he was livid. To think this, whoever she thought she was, had the nerve to say no to him. He gathered the tribes and he gathered his warriors and he put together a great fleet of ships and he packed into it warriors with sharp swords and battle axes, and off they sailed for war this time. Now meanwhile, Tazy and her dad were making plans, and together they made a good team, and she said, "Look, I want to go to the mainland, talk to my boyfriend." Her dad took her there and she went and talked to him. She told her boyfriend what had happened. He took her to see his dad, who was the chieftain of the clan O'Hanlon, and being a clever man, he said, "Well, I'm going to see my old enemies, the chieftain of the O'Neills." So he went to see Owen Roe O'Neill, the great warrior of the O'Neills, and he said, "The Vikings are coming for Tazy." Now, Owen Roe was a clever man. You didn't get to be the chieftain of the great clan O'Neill without being clever and resourceful, and he knew what this meant. If the Vikings conquered Rathlin, which they would have a base, and from that base they could conquer many Irish kingdoms, theirs included, powerful as they were. He said to the chieftain of the O'Hanlons, he said, "We've got to get together, forget our differences." "That's what I was thinking," said the chieftain of the O'Hanlons. "Let's get together." And they did. And they started to make plans. Well, now I'm going to fast forward to the day of the battle when all those plans came to fruition. It was a nice windy day, one of perfect for sailing ships, and the ships of the Viking fleet sailed fast that day. And pretty early in the afternoon they sailed within sight of Rathlin's Bay. And they were ready for action. They'd been in the boat for a week or more and they were dying to get out onto land, doing what they did best, slaughtering and plundering and raiding. Their swords were sharpened to razor edges, same with their battle axes, and they were banging their battle axes and swords onto their shield and making as much noise as possible, chanting their battle slogans. They couldn't wait to get going as they sailed into the bay. And they got a surprise because there on the beach, the people of the island were ready. There was about 50 of them, no match for the Viking fleet. But there was men and women and even some of the older children, all painted up and ready for war with whatever weapons they could get. And the Vikings thought, they're brave, I'll give them that, but they're no match for us. We're going to slaughter them. This is going to be an easy victory. And they grounded their boats and the Vikings leapt off like great Viking warriors do, and they charged up the beach shouting their war cries, and they were met in a clash of iron by the local people. And no sooner had they set to that they heard new battle cries coming from behind them. And quite surprised, they turned around and they saw many, many ships from the Irish clans O'Neill and O'Hanlon and McQuillan and many and many others all coming towards them. They were outnumbered and they were many in number. They tried to get back to their ships, but, well, I'm going to cut a long story even shorter. The Vikings suffered a massive defeat that day. Many of them were killed, almost all of them. But a few of them were left alive and allowed to return home to give the message, don't come back, because that's what you'll get. And the story would be told. Well, shortly after that, that's the end of the Viking problem, but then we've got the wedding between Tazy and her boyfriend, and a great wedding it was, and all the clans that had once been enemies were now together. They'd fought the Vikings together and they were friends now. They buried their differences. But there was still the problem of where they were going to live. Was it going to be on Tazy's island, or was it going to be on the mainland near his people? Well, the chieftain of the O'Neills sorted the problem out. He said, I've got a present for you, a wedding present. There's a tiny little glen on the northern edge of the Glens of Antrim, and Tazy, I'm giving it to you. And you don't have to pay rents or taxes to me. It's yours. Forever. And he said, not only that, but I'll help your people build you a little house, a little castle. And there you can live forever in peace. And that's what they did. The castle's gone now, but the hill where it stood is still there. And the glen is called Glen Tazy. And if you go to the 9 Glens of Antrim to this day, it's the 9th one, the very most northern one. And you can go and see, and you can look out from Glen Tazy and you can see the island of Rathlin. And that's the end of the story. Now I'm going to clear my throat because I was dying to do it at the end of that story. Excuse me. I've got one more little story to tell you. It's called a fable, and this is it. A goose was caught in the jaws of a fox. And the fox was savouring what was to come of his meal. And he said to the goose, he said, if I was in your mouth, what would you do? And the goose, she looked at him and she said, well, I would fold my arms, close my eyes and say grace. Ha ha ha, said the fox, that's just what I'm going to do. So he folded his paws, closed his eyes and opened his jaws to say grace when poof, the goose flew off. And by the time he opened his eyes, she was halfway across the lake to safety and freedom. And the fox said to himself, that's the last time I say grace until the meat is safely in my belly. And that's the end of the story. Thank you very much.
The riddle.
Oh, the riddle. Are we still recording? The riddle, yep. Thank you, Gwen. Only one colour but not one size, stuck at the bottom but easily flies, present in sun but not in rain, doing no harm and feeling no pain. Now Gwen knows the answer, so I'm not going to let her say it. Go on, you can say it, Gwen.
It's a shadow.
A shadow, yeah, it is. It's shadow. There you go. Well done, whoever got it right. If any of you did. Yeah, well done. Thank you. Bye.